Hey, this is Off the Cuff, and I'm Steve from TorahFamily.org. Today we're going to discuss a topic that I believe could very well be one of the most important teachings I've ever done on the end times. Now, not so much because I think that it's right, but rather because of the ramifications it could have if it's right. Let me explain what I mean by that. Over the last decade, there has been a growing movement of believing the anti-Messiah, the Antichrist, is going to be Islamic. I used to be one of those. Now, before I say even one more word on this, I want to make it very, very clear that I'm not saying that view is wrong. In fact, I have good friends who hold to this belief. I mean, good friends. Good friends who I hold dear, and I greatly respect them and their understanding of the Scriptures. Now, that being said, what if that view is wrong? This understanding regarding the anti-Messiah, the Antichrist, being Islamic, has great perspectives in it. One of those perspectives comes from the verses that we can find regarding the Assyrian who is said to invade Israel. Now, there is no doubt, I believe anyway, that the Assyrian is called to bring judgment. No doubt whatsoever. The Assyrian is called to bring judgment. My concern is how many believe the Assyrian will be the anti-Messiah, the Antichrist. I believe quite possibly the Assyrian is not the anti-Messiah. Rather, I believe the anti-Messiah will be the one who defeats the Assyrian. Okay, now let me explain. I believe the end times will be about deception. Yeshua said it would be a time where the very elect could be deceived if that were possible. I believe the enemy's focus, meaning Satan, in the end times will be to deceive the people of Yahweh. I don't believe it's going to be about deceiving the people of the world. Satan already has them deceived. So why would he try to deceive the deceived? He wants to deceive believers. In fact, in my teaching, Satan's Greatest Masquerade, Part 1 and Part 2, I discuss how the enemy could bring forth a false anti-Messiah, meaning Antichrist, to get people to accept the real anti-Messiah as the Messiah. Let me say that again because I know that sounds confusing. I believe the enemy could bring forth a false anti-Messiah to get people to accept the real anti-Messiah as the Messiah. In that teaching, I mentioned where Yeshua has been likened unto David. Thus, the anti-Messiah will come first as Saul did. So, while people will liken the anti-Messiah to David, he is really to be likened as to Saul because he came first. So just as Saul came before David, and knowing that Yeshua is likened unto David, thus the anti-Messiah will come just before Yeshua. Saul came, then David. Anti-Messiah, then Yeshua. Now, on a side note, in that teaching, I said Saul was ruling from Jerusalem. Now, my apologies, because he wasn't ruling from Jerusalem. He was ruling over Israel. Yes, I'm talking about Saul. He was ruling over Israel, but he didn't rule from Jerusalem. Now, the point, though, was how Yeshua is likened unto David. Thus, the anti-Messiah could be, and most likely should be likened unto Saul. So I hope all that makes sense. But in all of this, everybody is looking for the anti-Messiah, the Antichrist. Now, Satan knows this. Do we really think Satan is going to bring this guy out with horns on his head? No. He's going to make him look like he's fulfilling all the good prophecies. That's why Yeshua said the very elect could be deceived if that were possible. How would anyone follow someone that is matching all the verses to the bad guy? Satan is all about taking truth and twisting it to deceive believers. Thus, the anti-Messiah will appear to have all the markings of the real Messiah. As mentioned in my teaching, Veiled Hearts, the apocalypse will be the unveiling of Yeshua, the truth, causing, I believe, a huge revival to the Torah at the same time. Satan knows this. Thus, in comes the real anti-Messiah to twist things just enough to get people to think they're serving Yahweh, the one true God. This is also discussed in my teachings, The Image of the Beast and The Return of the Tent. So, if the end times is truly about deception, as Yeshua seems to imply, where do we see the Assyrian as a deceiver? Well, to my understanding, we don't. He brings judgment, not deception. So the true anti-Messiah could be the savior, if you will, to deliver Israel from their oppressor, the oppressor being the Assyrian. People are looking for this. This is why the deception is coming. Isaiah 14:25. I will crush the Assyrian in my land. On my mountains I will trample him down. His yoke will be taken from my people, and his burden removed from their shoulders. When looking at this verse, Yahweh doesn't say how the Assyrian is conquered. The assumption is always that it's Yeshua who defeats him. Then we see Micah chapter 5, starting in verse 5. And he will be their peace. When the Assyrian invades our land and marches through our fortresses, we will raise against him 7 shepherds, even 8 leaders of men. They will rule the land of Assyria with the sword, the land of Nimrod with drawn sword. He will deliver us from the Assyrian when he invades our land and marches into our borders. Now, the initial response when looking at this verse is, well, look, it says, and he will be their peace. That has to be talking about Yeshua, right? And we agree, that is talking about Yeshua. But let's get context, starting in verse 1. Marshal your troops, O city of troops, for a siege is laid against us. They will strike Israel's ruler on the cheek with the rod. But you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are from of old, from ancient times. Therefore, Israel will be abandoned until the time when she who is in labor gives birth, and the rest of his brothers return to join the Israelites. He will stand and shepherd his flock in the strength of Yahweh, in the majesty of the name of Yahweh his God, and they will live securely. For then his greatness will reach to the ends of the earth, and he will be their peace. Verse 1 is showing judgment coming to the land. It's at this time when the ruler Yeshua comes. This is when Yeshua comes and unites both sticks of Israel at Mount Sinai for the new covenant, the marriage. He will shepherd them, and they will truly live in peace. This is covered in our teaching, Armageddon and the Parousia. This is why Yeshua said to pray we escape all these things and stand before the Son of Man. That's marriage language. that which is spoken of in Revelation. Think about it. If Micah is discussing the overthrow of the Assyrian by Yeshua, why does it say, when the Assyrian invades our land and marches through our fortresses, we will raise against him 7 shepherds, even 8 leaders of men? Why doesn't it say Yeshua defeats him? Wouldn't that be the dominant theme? Here comes the Messiah to save the day? However, it doesn't say that. We simply assume it. Yet, this is a common assumption. Thus, this assumption could pave the way for the deception of the anti-Messiah coming in and saving the day under that thought. There are multiple places like this in the Scriptures. Another place we see the Assyrian mentioned is in Isaiah chapter 10. Isaiah 10, verse 5. Woe to the Assyrian, the rod of my anger, in whose hand is the club of my wrath. I send him against a godless nation. I dispatch him against a people who anger me, to seize loot and snatch plunder, and to trample them down like mud in the streets. There is no doubt here we see the Assyrian is used by Yahweh against Israel because he is angry with them. But first, why is Yahweh angry with them? Please consider Zechariah chapter 1. Then the angel of Yahweh said, Yahweh Almighty, how long will you withhold mercy from Jerusalem and from the towns of Judah, which you have been angry with these 70 years? In the Hebrew, the verse can read, when will you not give mercy to Jerusalem and the towns of Judah, which you have been angry with for these 70 years? Israel just celebrated their 70th anniversary of independence. Now, I can't think of any other time in history where Yahweh would be angry with them for a specific 70-year period. We know they were banished to Babylon for 70 years. But they were banished for 70 years. That was their time of judgment. He wasn't angry with them during those 70 years. So if these 70 years would be what this verse is talking about, why would Yahweh be angry with them these last 70 years? Well, I believe quite possibly because they never made Torah the law of the land. They were autonomous. They could have made the Torah the law of the land completely on their own, but they didn't. They chose a governmental system very similar to that of America. So, the people of Yahweh, living in the land of Yahweh, chose not to be governed by the law of Yahweh. So, they've done the same thing as in times past. When Yahweh's people, living in his land, didn't follow his law, what happened? Yahweh sent another nation to bring judgment upon them. Thus, here comes the Assyrian. Isaiah 10 discusses this, and it can appear that Yahweh defeats the Assyrian in Isaiah 10 by way of the Messiah. This is believed because of what we read in Isaiah chapter 11. The very next chapter, it starts off like this. A shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse. From his roots a branch will bear fruit. The Spirit of Yahweh will rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and of understanding, the Spirit of counsel and of power, the Spirit of knowledge and of the fear of Yahweh. The whole chapter discusses this. There is no doubt this is talking about the Messiah in chapter 11, but it's the timing that is assumed. The assumption is that it's the Messiah mentioned here in chapter 11 is the one who conquers the Assyrian. But when looking closely, it doesn't specifically say that. So again, this is an assumption. Thus, the assumption could pave the way for the deception of the anti-Messiah coming and saving the day and claiming himself as the Messiah. And again, I'm not saying the traditional view of these verses are wrong. Please get that. However, I am saying that maybe, just maybe, we need to be cautious in declaring that view as fact. This is where I believe we can see the reason of the 1,290 days versus the 1,260 days mentioned in the Scriptures. The Assyrian comes at the start of the 1,290 days. The anti-Messiah comes to power 30 days later at the start of the 1,260 days mentioned in Revelation. Most likely, he has saved the day from the Assyrian and is given his authority as their leader. The 1,290 days is what Yeshua references in Matthew chapter 24. The 1,290 is mentioned in Daniel chapter 12. It seems to be the starting point for everything. Daniel is shown 2 points in time here: the end and the beginning of the tribulation. Not the same event. Yeshua is the one who brings the daily sacrifice to an end on the day of Armageddon. The beginning is when the Assyrian makes Jerusalem desolate. The anti-Messiah will be the one who establishes the sacrifices again after he defeats the Assyrian. That's why so many will accept him. Now, that may sound odd to you. If so, this is explained in our teaching, Satan's Greatest Masquerade, Part 1 and Part 2. And I believe the teachings, the image of the beast, and the return of the tent will help here as well. The 1,260 days mentioned in Revelation is where we see the rise of the anti-Messiah. Have you ever noticed how the 2 beasts mentioned in Revelation has 10 horns and 2 horns? Possibly representing the 10 tribes of the northern kingdom and the 2 tribes of the southern kingdoms of Israel. Is this just a coincidence? I also discussed this in my teaching, The King of the North. This could be where the anti-Messiah will look like the Messiah and striving to bring the 2 sticks of the house of Israel together again. Now, many are quick to say how Jerusalem will be made desolate and stay that way through all the end times, meaning the tribulation. But then they forget and say that the anti-Messiah will set everything up from Jerusalem. Now, if his kingdom is set up in Jerusalem, and he sets himself up in God's temple, claiming himself to be God, how can Jerusalem be desolate all that time? Do you see the contradiction? If everything is made desolate, how does he set everything up there? It's either desolate or it's not. However, if the anti-Messiah, the Antichrist, conquers the one who made it desolate, there is a reason to see him setting everything back up in the land. Thus, the deception takes place. It's made desolate from the Assyrian and his band of kings. This will be the judgment on Israel for not making the Torah the law of the land these last 70 years. Yahweh will use the Assyrian just as he used all the other nations that invaded Israel before. History is simply repeating all over again, as it always does. However, this will be when the enemy will try to make the prophecies about Yeshua line up with the anti-Messiah. For people to be deceived, there has to be a savior, if you will, to defeat the oppressor. One who then sets up the Ark of the Covenant and then the tent. This would bring deception to many when they see the miracles and the Ark speaking as it did in the days of Moses. So many today are looking for the day when Yeshua sets everything up again. You know, the anti-Messiah will do just that. Many may even think he's setting up Ezekiel's temple for the millennium. The deception will be running rampant, and it would be under the guise of following the Torah, to deceive people to thinking Isaiah chapter 2 verse 4 is about to take place. Many peoples will come and say, "Come, let us go up to the mountain of Yahweh, to the house of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways, so that we may walk in his paths. The law will go out from Zion, the word of Yahweh from Jerusalem." That which is also found in Micah chapter 4, verse 2. Deception will be running rampant in those days. That's why Yeshua said the very elect would be deceived if that were possible. Satan doesn't care about deceiving the world. He wants to deceive believers. Well, I have a lot more I want to cover, but I believe I need to set all that to the side for right now and say that for a different teaching. The biggest thing I wanted to bring forth in this teaching is the possibility of the Assyrian not being the anti-Messiah, the Antichrist. In fact, I truly believe that thought could simply be setting up the pathway for the endgame deception of the anti-Messiah. I'm not declaring this as fact, okay, but I really do believe it's something we should be putting to prayer, or at the very least see how something like this in this manner can happen to set up the deception of getting people to accept the anti-Messiah as the real Messiah. Well, let's call it at that, okay? Think about it. Pray about it. But more than anything, be a doer of the word and not a hearer only. Until next time, Shalom.